After 7 years of living off the very house I bought, my son and daughter-in-law suddenly won $85 million. But instead of being grateful for the shelter I gave them, by noon that very day my daughter-in-law had cruelly thrown all my belongings out the window, china shattering across the street while she screamed, "We don't need to do charity for you anymore. Go die old in a nursing home." I stood in the yard, clothes dusty and rumpled, my heartbeat steady, and quietly said, "Did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" Her victorious smile froze for a split second, and soon that single question would make her glittering world collapse for good. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Lorraine Whitmore, 63, a widow for nearly a decade. Since Arthur passed, the two-story house in the suburbs of Savannah, Georgia, became my only refuge, and then my son Mason's as well, along with his beautiful but overly sharp wife, Brielle. 7 years ago, when Mason lost his job and Brielle was pregnant, they knocked on my door in a fall storm, soaked and shivering. I opened the door, didn't ask much, and just said, "Come in, this house always has room for you." From then on, we lived together 3 generations, seemingly peaceful until that fateful morning. That morning, I got up early as usual to make coffee and pancakes for the little ones, Ava, 8, and Micah, 5. But instead of the small footsteps chattering down the stairs, I heard a scream rip through the house from downstairs. "Mason, get up now!" Brielle's shrill voice rang out, bursting with excitement. I set the coffee pot down, heart pounding. I was used to my daughter-in-law's temper, but today there was something different: excitement, panic, almost mania. The wooden stairs shook as Mason ran down. I stayed at the top landing, holding my breath. A minute of silence. Then suddenly, shouts exploded. "No way. Oh my God, no way. We won, Mason. $85 million. $85 million. I looked down and saw Brielle clutching the lottery ticket, trembling with excitement. Mason hugged her, laughing and repeating, "I can't believe it. I can't believe it." They both jumped up and down, tears streaming over young, hungry faces. And I, the one who bought that very ticket yesterday, with the numbers I've used for 20 years, each one a family birthday, stood frozen. My heart sank, not because of the money, but because they never asked, "Mom, is this your ticket?" I stepped halfway down the stairs, about to speak, when Brielle turned, eyes blazing like someone who'd just found buried treasure. "We're rich, Mason. Finally, we don't have to live in this old house anymore." She said it and kissed the ticket like a trophy. I stopped. The words, "this old house," stabbed right through me. The home Arthur and I built with every saved dollar, every extra shift, every can of paint we rolled on with our own hands. I wanted to say I was the one who bought that ticket at the corner convenience store, but the words stuck in my throat. I looked at Mason, my only son, hoping he'd realize something. But he just stood there, letting Brielle call the shots, like always. I went back to my small room in the attic, heavy-hearted. I brewed tea, but my hands shook so hard I spilled water on the table. For the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own home. About an hour later, I heard cars pulling up, nosy neighbors arriving after hearing about the lottery family. Laughter, doors slamming, glasses clinking. I looked out the window and saw Brielle showing off, waving the ticket, and Mason beside her, smiling awkwardly. By noon, there was a hard knock on my door. Brielle stood there, arms crossed, lips curled. "Start packing. We're moving, and we don't need any dead weight coming along." I didn't grasp it at first. "Dead weight?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "Yeah, we're buying a mansion. It wouldn't make sense for you to come. At your age, it's better to find a decent nursing home. They'll take care of you there." I looked her in the eye. "This is my house, Brielle. Used to be, Lorraine," she said, emphasizing each word. Now we have a new life. And you're not part of it." Then she yanked open the closet and started throwing my things, dresses, the wedding photo, a pottery vase I made when I was young. Everything went crashing into the yard below. I stood there, silent, while neighbors gathered and whispered. Mason stood on the threshold, hands in his pockets, face pale, but he didn't step in to stop his wife. "Brielle, stop!" he muttered, but she didn't listen. "We don't need to do charity for you anymore," she shouted, as if she wanted the whole neighborhood to hear. The words felt like a knife in my chest. I quietly bent down, picked up the shattered frame, and wiped the dust off with my sleeve. The elderly neighbor across the street hurried over to help me gather things, but I stopped her. "Thank you, but I can do it." I collected what was still intact, a few changes of clothes, a wedding photo, and a small box holding Arthur's ring. When a beat-up yellow cab pulled up, I stood, took a long breath. I turned to Mason, my son, whom I'd once believed would protect his mother for life. "You're not going to say anything?" I asked, calm and firm. He looked down. "Brielle, just went a little too far, Mom." "No, Mason," I said. "This is the choice you two made." I walked toward the gate, then stopped. Brielle stood there, arms crossed, still wearing that triumphant smile. I looked straight at her. "Did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" For a split second, that smile stalled. A flicker of doubt crossed her eyes, then she quickly feigned disdain. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I didn't answer. I opened the cab door, put my suitcase in the trunk, and told the driver softly, "Anywhere, with the cheapest rooms nearby." As the car pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. Mason stood frozen on the steps, the two little ones pressed to the upstairs window, eyes red-rimmed. Brielle turned away, pretending to be on the phone, but I could see her shoulders tighten. The room I rented sat above a Chinese restaurant. It barely fit a twin bed, a wobbly wooden table, and a window stuck in its frame. The smell of frying oil rose from downstairs, seeping into my hair and clothes. I sat on the edge of the bed, opened my bag, and took out a paper folded in quarters, the purchase receipt. The scrawled Lorraine Whitmore in the signature box was still clear. I ran my finger over the name and heard Arthur's voice in my ear. "Always sign your name, Lorraine. People can forget everything else, but a signature never lies." I smiled faintly. Outside, the city buzzed, but in that tiny room I felt a strange peace. They thought I'd lost, but really, the game had only just begun. After Arthur was laid to rest, the house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking all night. I missed him, his tall, slender frame, the way he grumbled when I added extra salt to the stew, and that raspy laugh every early morning. Widowhood at 56 taught me to speak less and keep small rituals to feel like he was still around, pouring 2 cups of coffee each morning, straightening the armchair by the fireplace, sometimes whispering, "I'm okay, Arthur." Then, one February night in a downpour, Mason showed up. He stood on the porch, soaked, gripping a suitcase. Behind him was Brielle, makeup smeared, eyes red. "Mom, we lost the apartment. My company folded. The landlord wants rent now. We can't swing it." I opened the door without further questions and nodded. "Come in, this house always has room for you." Brielle thanked me, voice trembling. She was young, beautiful, and knew how to draw sympathy. That day I believed I was doing the right thing. I couldn't have imagined that Mason's just a few months would stretch into 7 years, 7 years of being the help in the very house with my name on the deed. At first, things seemed fine. I gave them the big downstairs room, the one Arthur loved for its east-facing windows. "Morning sun is good for the baby," I said. Mason squeezed my hand and smiled. "Thanks, Mom. I'll pay you back soon." But soon never came. After Ava was born, then Micah 2 years later, Brielle didn't return to work. Mason bounced between jobs, some months bringing home nothing. I covered every utility bill, groceries, and the homeowner's insurance with my teacher's pension and what little savings of Arthur's remained. I didn't regret it. I believed family love balances itself, that when they got stable, they'd lift me up in return. I remembered Arthur's words before he died. "If you can, don't let our kid know hunger, Lorraine." So I did everything to keep the house warm. Mornings I woke at 5 a.m., made breakfast for everyone, packed Mason's lunch, and took Ava to preschool. Afternoons I did laundry, cooked dinner, and rocked Micah to sleep. Everything ran like a clock I wound with my own hands. Then one day Brielle said, "Mom, I need a quiet place to work. My old company's letting me do consulting from home. Maybe you could move up to the attic. I'll turn your room into a home office." I hesitated. The attic was a storage space, low-ceilinged and sweltering in summer, but she said it in that syrupy tone. "It's more private up there. You can rest without the kids making noise." I forced a smile. "If it's convenient for you, do it." I didn't know that decision pushed me to the top floor of my own house and pushed me out of the role of mother in my family. From then on, I officially became Miss Lorraine upstairs. Brielle reorganized the kitchen and labeled everything top shelf for the kids, bottom shelf for Mason's snacks. That cabinet is where you can keep your tea. I didn't object, but I felt like a boarder. That winter, she started hosting adults-only dinners. I still cooked and set the table, but when dinner began, Brielle would smile and say, "Mom, I saved you a plate in the kitchen. We need to discuss work." I stepped out, closed the kitchen door, and ate alone under the yellow light. From the living room came laughter, clinking glasses, and Brielle talking like the lady of the house. I kept telling myself, "It's fine, they're young, they have their own lives. I just need to stay quiet." But silence, when long enough, becomes shackles. When Ava started talking, Brielle taught her to call me Miss Lorraine instead of Grandma. "Grandma sounds odd in the mouth, Mom," she said. "Miss Lorraine is younger and more polite." I laughed it off, but that night I cried in the bathroom. The next day I still made my granddaughter's milk as if nothing had happened. In the third year, Mason switched to part-time engineering. I asked about his pay. He avoided my eyes. "Enough to get by, Mom." I knew it wasn't true, but didn't press. When your child looks down out of shame, a mother often chooses to pretend not to see. I kept paying for electricity, water, health insurance, and sometimes slipped in extra for Ava's tuition. I told myself I could shoulder it, as long as they stayed afloat. By the fourth year, Brielle began setting rules. "Mom, no sweets for the kids at night." "Mom, the house needs to be spotless. Guests are coming." "Mom, towels should be folded this way, not the old way." Each thing sounded small, but together they nicked like 1,000 paper cuts. I listened. I did. I swallowed it. Once, I made Arthur's favorite stew. The smell filled the kitchen. Mason breathed in deeply. "Man, it's been a while." Brielle frowned. "Red meat is full of cholesterol, Mason. You don't want to die young like your dad, do you?" The table fell silent. I looked down at my plate and murmured, "Your dad ate this up to 85 and was still healthy." She smirked. "Different times, Mom." After that dinner, I understood. In this house, I was no longer allowed to cook from memory. Mason wasn't heartless, just weak. When I said Brielle was going too far, he sighed. "She's under a lot of pressure, Mom. I'm gone all day, and she's home with 2 kids. And I'm taking care of the whole house." I wanted to say, but didn't. Sometimes I overheard Brielle on the phone with friends. "I'm living with my mother-in-law. It's so hard, she interferes in everything." Each time I wondered who she was talking about, because I hardly meddled in anything anymore. I just quietly cleaned, did laundry, and recorded expenses in a small notebook. I still remember a spring morning. I was hanging laundry in the backyard when I heard Brielle in the kitchen telling Mason, Do you know how people see us? A married couple living off his old mother. I want a place of our own. But Mom pays the homeowner's insurance here. Selling's not that simple. Then have her sign the transfer. She doesn't need a big house anyway. I stood behind the curtain, heart pounding, not from fear, but because I realized I'd given them too much. Piece by piece, until they believed everything they had was theirs by right. That summer I started journaling. Every night I opened an old leather notebook. The first line was always the same: day of patience. I didn't write much more, just small notes. Brielle nagged about towels. Mason forgot to pick up Ava. Micah was sick. I stayed up all night. Tiny, crooked lines like the trace of someone fading from her own life. Even so, one thing in me never went out: tenderness. I loved Mason, the boy who used to carry me. Piggyback when my back hurt. I loved the two little ones, who laughed every time I baked cookies. I even loved Brielle, though she hurt me. Maybe because I believed people can change, that one day they'd understand I did everything out of love, but patience has limits. And what broke it wasn't a big fight, just a small thing so small that if I told it, people might think I was overreacting. Yet I remember that afternoon perfectly, sunlight slanting through the window, when Brielle said one sentence that completely shattered my endurance. Ava's 10th birthday came on a bright April day, the yard filled with azalea scent. I still remember her eyes when she pointed to the sign in the sporting goods store, a turquoise bicycle with a white wicker basket and shimmering streamers trailing in the wind. "Grandma, if I had that bike, I'd never be late for school again." She beamed. I smiled too, with a knot in my chest. I knew the price of that bike, $200, almost all of what was left of my pension after paying that month's bills. I hesitated many times, then still decided to buy it. I saved every spare coin, cut my spending for weeks, even gave up my favorite almond milk. She's only 10 once, I told myself. And sometimes one gift can make a childhood feel complete. 3 days before Ava's birthday, I quietly walked to the shop in town. The clerk, a curly-haired kid, helped me pick the exact turquoise bike she loved. I asked for silver wrapping paper with sunflowers printed on it, tied with a white bow. When the paper caught the sunlight, I smiled, picturing my granddaughter's shining face. I hid the bike in the garage and threw an old cloth over it. I couldn't sleep all night, replaying the moment Ava would see it. Arthur would have smiled if he were still here. He used to say, "Sometimes the smallest gift becomes the biggest memory." I wanted to give her a memory like that. On the morning of her birthday, I got up, earlier than usual. I made heart-shaped pancakes topped with strawberries and whipped cream. The kitchen smelled wonderful. I hung a few balloons by the window and set a vase of white roses in the center of the table. The house rarely felt that cheerful. I put on the old blue dress Arthur once complimented and felt a few years younger. Ava ran down the stairs, blonde pigtails bouncing, clapping and singing. "It's my birthday! Grandma, you remembered!" I opened my arms and hugged her. "Of course, sweetheart, I have a surprise for you." I hadn't finished the sentence when Brielle walked in wrinkled pajamas, hair pinned high. She looked around, frowning at the balloons and strawberries. "Mom, what is all this?" I said we didn't need to make a big deal. "It's just breakfast for Ava. It didn't cost much," I answered gently. She opened the fridge, poured a glass of orange juice, then turned back, voice syrupy. "You know, Mason and I already agreed this year we want to teach her about saving. No expensive gifts. We want her to understand the value of money." I looked at Ava and saw her smile dim. I tried to stay calm. "Don't worry, I only got a small present, nothing extravagant." Brielle raised an eyebrow. "Small, huh?" I smiled. "You'll see tonight." She stayed quiet, but her eyes were wary. I knew Brielle didn't like me doing anything that might make her look less in front of the kids. With her, everything I did had an angle. That afternoon, when Mason brought the kids home from school, I took out the garage key. "Ava, come here with Grandma," I called. She ran over, eyes lighting up as I pulled back the cloth to reveal the shimmering turquoise bike. "Oh my gosh, it's beautiful!" Ava gasped, almost breathless. "Is it really mine, Grandma?" I nodded. "Happy birthday, my little angel." She threw her arms around me, laughing and crying at the same time. My heart melted with happiness. But the moment lasted only seconds. Brielle's voice cut in behind us, cold as steel. "What is this?" She came closer, eyes raking over the bike, then stared straight at me. "I told you, Mom, no expensive gifts." I stayed calm. "It's just a bike, Brielle. She's dreamed about it all year." "That's not the point. The point is you're breaking our parenting rules." "Rules?" I repeated, with a small smile. "I don't recall love having rules." She stepped in, voice low and sharp as a blade. "You did this just to show the kids you're better than me, didn't you?" "Brielle, don't be ridiculous," Mason chimed in, but his voice was weak. I looked at her. "I did it because I love my granddaughter, that's all." Ava gripped my hand, frightened by her parents arguing. "Mom, please, I'll clean the bike myself. I won't ask for any more presents," she sobbed. But Brielle just sighed, then crouched to Ava's eye level. "Sweetie, we just want you to learn to appreciate things. This bike isn't right. Grandma will return it, and then you'll understand why grown-ups have to save." "No!" Ava burst into tears. I held her, feeling her little heart thudding against my chest. "That's enough, Brielle," I said, my voice tight. "If you want to teach a lesson, use your own money, not her joy." She only pressed her lips together and pulled out her phone. "Mom, return the bike, or I will. I'm not joking." That afternoon, I walked the bike back to the store, each step heavy as stone. The wind rustled through the trees, making the white bow flutter and whisper like Ava's laughter that morning. I took one last look before stepping inside and drew a deep breath. "I'd like to return this bike," I told the curly-haired clerk. "Are you sure, ma'am?" "It's our last one." "Yes." The little girl changed her mind. When I signed the refund slip, my hand shook so much the ink smeared. I folded the receipt and tucked it into my wallet. As I left, a light rain started. Cold drops hit my cheeks, mixing with the salty taste at the corner of my mouth. That night, the house was quiet. No cake, no candles, just the TV murmuring in the living room. I set out the small cake. I'd already bought a simple vanilla butter cake on the kitchen table and placed the card I'd written, "Happy birthday, Ava, love you always. Grandma." Then I lit a tiny candle and watched it burn down, the flicker reflecting on Arthur's photo on the wall. "Do you see this?" I whispered. "Our granddaughter isn't allowed to receive a bicycle because of a lesson on saving. I don't have enough say in my own house anymore." I stood, put on my coat, and stepped outside. The April night was colder than I expected. The corner store cast a dim yellow glow, the one where I usually bought milk. I had no plan, just knew I needed air. The shop was nearly empty. The owner, a familiar Italian gentleman, smiled. "Cold night, Miss Lorraine. Still want coffee?" I shook my head, then my eyes stopped at the lottery counter next to the register. A small sign read, "Jackpot tomorrow night, $85 million. I gave a tired, wry smile. "One ticket, please, with these numbers." I slowly read the familiar sequence: 10, 14, 21, 25, 30, 41, 47. Birthdays for Arthur, me, Mason, and the two kids. The numbers I'd played for 20 years, an old habit that never meant much. I pulled out a pen and signed the back. Lorraine Whitmore, Arthur's old rule, always sign and keep the receipt, Lorraine. People can argue plenty, but they can't fake a signature. I smiled at the owner, slid the ticket and receipt into my coat pocket. "I could use a little luck tonight," he replied. "Hope you get what you're wishing for." On the way home, I looked at the lit windows in the dark and wondered how many people inside were as tired as I was, still trying to believe in good, even when hurt by their own family. I wasn't hoping for wealth. I was asking for one simple thing: a way out. When I got home, I placed the ticket and receipt on the kitchen table, right where anyone could see, as if laying down a quiet prayer to the universe. Then I went up to the attic and listened to the rain tapping on the roof. The next morning, as the first light slipped through the window, I heard Brielle shriek downstairs, her voice high with excitement. "Mason, wake up, now! We won!" Rushed footsteps, then a burst of laughter, quick kisses, a chair scraping. 85 million! Oh my God, we won 85 million! I sat up, heart pounding. I didn't need to look to know which ticket they were holding. I stepped onto the stairs and looked down at a scene both familiar and strange. Brielle clinging to Mason, tears of joy, the ticket held high, the ticket I had bought. "I can't believe it. Who'd have thought, just picked it up off the table and our lives changed?" Brielle yelled, buzzing with excitement. "Maybe someone forgot it, but it's ours now." Mason laughed, hugging her tight. I stood still on the staircase. What started with a returned bicycle was turning into a storm I'd never imagined. I said nothing. I just watched the two people I'd supported for 7 years dancing around my kitchen as if fate had handed them a reward. I closed my eyes and told myself, "Stay quiet, Lorraine. Let them think they've won." I wanted to see how far their greed would take them and whether on that road they'd have enough conscience to realize the ticket was never theirs. 3 days after they won, the phone in my rented room rang off the hook at 7 a.m. I didn't pick up in time before it rang again, urgent, as if someone were racing the clock. "This is Grant Holloway, counsel for the Georgia State Lottery Commission," a calm baritone said. You need to verify a few details about the lottery ticket registered to Lorraine Whitmore." "Is now a good time?" I paused, heart quickening. "Yes, I'm the one who bought that ticket." Papers rustled on his end. "We've matched the signature, serial number, and our system records. The ticket was registered under the name Lorraine Whitmore, former Savannah address, correct?" "Correct. Then congratulations, you're the grand prize winner. $85 million. I was quiet for a few seconds. Not because I was surprised, but because a strange feeling rose in me, not exactly joy, not shock, more like when a storm you saw from miles away finally arrives. "Mr. Holloway continued, his tone turning serious, "But I need you to be aware third parties have contacted the commission claiming to be the real owner of the ticket. A woman named Brielle Carter Whitmore." I closed my eyes and smiled. "I'm guessing she didn't forget the hyphenated last name?" "Not at all," he said, a bit surprised at my composure. "She claims the ticket was bought with marital funds and that you, pardon my bluntness, are no longer competent to manage assets." I let out a small laugh, steady. "They haven't changed. When they can't take something, they try to convince others I'm not smart enough to keep it." I heard typing on his end. "Could you confirm a few items so we can protect your legal rights? The back signature, your ID number, and proof of purchase time?" I opened my wallet and pulled out the receipt I'd sealed between 2 laminates. "I have the receipt. Benny's Corner Mart. Purchase time, 7:43 p.m., Friday, April 12th. The serial number matches the ticket. I also have copies of my ID, and the store camera will show it." I spoke clearly, without a hint of hesitation. On the other end, Holloway's voice dropped, impressed. "Excellent. That's sufficient to affirm you as the lawful owner. However, I should warn you, these folks seem ready to cause trouble. They may push rumors that you're confused or even forge medical records." I sighed, but didn't waver. "Don't worry. I'm used to their labeling games. In my life, I've had many tags: weak, stubborn, old-fashioned. One more won't matter." A beat of silence, then he said slowly, "You're the calmest person I've ever told they've won $85 million. I gave a small smile. Because to me, the real prize isn't the money, it's the truth. Before ending the call, he reminded me, the claim window is 10 days from today. If you need it, we can arrange security or independent financial advisors. I thanked him, then said, I'll make arrangements. But give me a few days, I want to see how far their performance goes. After the call, I sat still for a long time. Morning light slipped through the small window and washed over the peeling gray wall. I felt caught between two worlds. On one side, the shabby room that smelled like fryer oil. On the other, the people who'd just declared themselves millionaires with my money. I pulled out my old notebook and wrote a few lines. Day 1 after the win. I'm still poor, but richer than they are in one way. I still have my self-respect. I closed the notebook and dialed Penelope Banks, my neighbor of 30 years. Penelope's the kind of woman everyone respects. Serious, fair, and allergic to show-offs. Lorraine, good Lord, where are you? The whole neighborhood's talking about your lottery win. I knocked a few times and only saw your daughter-in-law, she said. You went on vacation? I laughed. Yeah, I'm on vacation somewhere with no air conditioning, no people, and a smell of grease in my hair. What on earth? Pen, I need a favor. I kept it short. Watch the house for a few days. Note dates, plates, what cars show up. I want to see how fast they burn through cash. Penelope. I was quiet a few seconds, then asked softly, What are you going to do, Lorraine? I'm not going to do anything, I said lightly. I just want the truth to surface at the right time, in the right place. In the afternoon, I stopped by First Southern Bank and opened a small safe deposit box. The young teller asked, What will you be storing, ma'am? My future, I said, placing inside the original receipt a photocopy of the ticket and copies of my ID. I kept scans and a few photos on my phone. I've learned that sometimes justice needs to be kept in more than one drawer. As I left the bank, I caught my reflection in the glass, an older woman with silver hair, a gray cardigan, and an oddly steady gaze. Arthur used to tell me, You're gentle, but when pushed, you turn into ice. Today, I understood he was right. I walked back and stopped at a sidewalk cafe. It was small, with just a few people reading the paper. I ordered a hot black coffee, pulled out my notebook and began to write. Saturday, 10 They still think I'm weak. They don't know the ticket has already spoken for me. I'm not running, I'm preparing. Every lie is a trap, and all I have to do is wait for the snap. That evening, when the city lights came on, I got the first text from Mason. Mom, we want to talk. Brielle is stressed, don't believe what the papers are saying. The papers? I opened my phone, and sure enough, a local site had posted, Savannah couple wins jackpot. Elderly mother gifts ticket to her son, then disappears. I laughed out loud. Even their lies were clumsy, I murmured. Congratulations, Brielle. You just publicly admitted I bought the ticket. I texted Mason back. Don't worry, I'm not missing. I'm just seeing clearly who's genuine and who isn't. Then I turned off my phone and lay back on the bed. Rain ticked against the window. I didn't know where they were, maybe touring mansions, maybe ordering a new car, maybe planning a new millionaire party, but I knew one thing, the rules had changed. From the moment the signature Lorraine Whitmore appeared on the back of the ticket, they could lie, they could threaten, but they couldn't erase the truth. I put my hand on the notebook and wrote one last line before turning out the light. Tomorrow, when they buy more cars, more dresses, more lies, I'll just smile. Because this game isn't about money. It's about character. I used to think greed only shows when people are desperate. Turns out, it grows even bigger when they get something they never deserved. Just 3 days after the win, Brielle started performing like a star. She made a new social media account called The Lucky Whitmore. On flashy live streams, she wore an ivory silk dress, held a glass of wine, and smiled sweet as sugar. Life can be very fair, she told thousands of viewers. If you do the right thing, The universe will send a reward. I watched that video on my old phone in the rented room, half amused and half heartsick. Because in that line about the universe rewarding people who do the right thing, Brielle was implying I was the opposite, an old, senile freeloader living off her kids. On her live stream, she said, "My mother-in-law once promised to gift the ticket to the family, and we didn't want to accept it, but she insisted." Every line was crafted to sound grateful while planting doubt. I read the comments below. "So lucky to have such a generous mother-in-law. She must really love her daughter-in-law." And one that stung my eyes. "Hope the old lady doesn't try to take back what she gave." They didn't know. They hadn't seen Brielle's real face. But they would. That morning, Penelope called. "Lorraine, you won't believe it. The whole neighborhood is buzzing about your house. Furniture trucks, flower deliveries, even a brand new SUV parked right out front. The dealer sticker's still on." I chuckled. "I believe it, Pen. I even know the color black with a silver sheen. Sporty model, right?" She burst out laughing. "Exactly." "You're psychic. No need to guess, Pen." With Brielle, the bigger the better, as long as someone is watching. At noon, Penelope sent photos. Brielle posing at the front door, holding a bouquet of white roses, next to a sign that read, "The Whitmore Residence." Mason forced a smile beside her, while the two kids were dressed in matching white outfits more like ad models than children. White roses. Arthur used to say, "Nothing is emptier than a white rose beautiful, but no scent." I've never heard a truer line. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Brielle. Her voice was candy sweet, nothing like the tone of someone who'd thrown me out of my own house. "Miss Lorraine, I just want a gentle chat. We're family, right?" I stayed silent. "About the ticket," she went on. "There's probably a small mix-up. I just need you to sign a brief confirmation that it isn't yours. It's only to help the bank process things faster." I gave a small laugh. "Brielle, when did you read the name on the back of the ticket?" Lorraine's question may sound gentle, but it's stronger than any revenge. If you've ever been misunderstood or looked down on like she was, would you stay silent or speak up like that? Share how you feel below. Sometimes one honest comment is enough to give strength to someone going through the same thing. Dead silence on the other end. The pause stretched so long I could hear her breathing quicken. Then she changed the subject. "People online are saying you're not in a stable situation. I'm just worried someone might take advantage of you." I cut in. "Thanks for the concern. But the only person who's ever taken advantage of me is the one on this call." I hung up, and when I looked out the window, rain began to fall, each drop tapping the foggy glass like a signal that a storm was coming. The next night, an email came from Attorney Holloway. "Miss Lorraine, we just received a letter from the law office of Carter Whitmore Family Holdings. It alleges you lack the financial and mental capacity to manage assets and requests that financial guardianship be transferred to your son, Mason Whitmore." I wasn't surprised. I knew Brielle would play this card, attacking with the senile mother image she'd seeded in public. "Still," I asked, "what do you think, Holloway?" He gave a short, wry laugh. "I think it's a bad play. They don't understand the law. Your signature, the original receipt, the purchase data, they're all solid. If they push this, they'll cause trouble for themselves." "Then let them keep going," I said. "The farther they walk, the more footprints they leave." The next day, Penelope called again, voice lowered to a near whisper. "Lorraine, I've heard them arguing all afternoon." Mason yelled, "Stop it, this is my mother!" And Brielle screamed, "No way! If you don't take my side, you lose everything!" I closed my eyes. Mason's image flashed in my mind, the little boy who once pedaled his bike around the yard, who promised, "I'll protect you forever, Mom." Now he was stuck between his mother and a wife draining his soul. I didn't blame him. I was just sad. Sometimes love can make people blind. I lit a small candle and placed it by Arthur's photo on the table. The light washed over his gentle, steady face, just like before. "Do you see this, Arthur?" I whispered. "I did what you asked. I'm not bowing my head anymore. I'll stand tall, even if I'm standing alone." I sat a long time watching the flame tremble. Every time a draft slipped through the doorframe, the flame wavered but didn't go out. In it, I saw myself maybe shaky, but still shining. I opened my notebook and wrote a new page. "Already spent it, Mom. Deposits on 2 cars, down payment on a mansion on Tybee Island, signed a furniture contract, even paid for a Europe trip. All from a pending funds account. They said the money would arrive soon." I sat on the old plastic chair and listened, each word cutting like a blade. "So," I asked quietly, "you spent money you didn't have?" Mason was silent. I thought he'd make excuses, but he didn't. Just a sigh and a faint rustle, like he was raking his hand through his hair. I closed my eyes. "Mason, for 7 years, who paid the electric bill, the water, the insurance, the kids' schooling?" "No answer," I repeated, slower. "Who, Mason?" After a heavy few seconds, he said softly, "You did." "Right," I said. "Me. The person you said was living off you. The one thrown out of her own house. The one labeled, 'not competent,' and now you're calling to ask if the ticket is mine." Mason's voice shook. I didn't know Brielle would do that. She said, she thought you wouldn't take it back." I gave a small, bitter laugh. "She doesn't understand me, Mason. I can forgive being poor. I can't forgive deception." I paused, then said slowly, "You want to talk? Fine. Come to where I am. Today, 2 p.m. Mason was quiet. I heard an engine start on his end. "Mom, I'll come." "Good," I said, "but bring the truth. No gifts, no excuses. Just the truth." After the call, I looked around my little room, not fancy, not tidy, but the only place still mine. The peeling wooden table, the old beige curtain, the slightly crooked plastic chair where I wrote every night. I wiped the dust off the chair, steadied its legs, then opened the window to let in the morning air with its mix of fryer oil and coffee from the restaurant downstairs. That smell used to bother me, but today it made me feel alive, like I'd stepped back into a real rhythm of living, no longer faking niceness to keep anyone happy. Before the meeting time, the phone rang again. It was Attorney Halloway. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I've secured an identity verification and prize claim slot for you. 3 p.m. tomorrow at the main office. Please arrive 15 minutes early." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thank you, Grant. This is almost over. Do you want us to alert the press? In cases like yours, the media is very interested." I answered, "Not yet. I want a few people to know the truth before the world does." After the call, I brewed a pot of peppermint tea. The fresh scent filled the room, blending with the soft noon light. I sat at the table, opened my notebook, and wrote one more line. "Monday, 6:45. My son asked, 'Did you buy the ticket?' I answered, 'Yes.' Maybe this morning, for the first time in 7 years, he heard his mother's real voice." I closed the notebook and set it beside the cup. On the wall, an old family photo hung slightly crooked. In it, me, Arthur, and 5-year-old Mason stood in front of the first house we bought. Sunlight lit our faces bright and peaceful. I touched the faded frame. "Arthur," I whispered, "if you were here, what would you do? Would you forgive him?" I answered myself in silence. "Maybe you would. I won't." I poured more water into the pot, and the steam fogged the window. Each bead on the glass reflected a memory. Mason's first day of school and the lunch I packed. Arthur laughing, saying the boy looked just like him. Then the funeral, the driving rain, and me standing alone as the casket was lowered. That day I promised to protect our son at all costs. But it turns out, sometimes protecting means letting him face his own mistakes. It wasn't even 2 o'clock yet, but I was ready. I set the table, arranged 2 cups of tea and a small plate of cookies. Nothing fancy, just my habit. Older folks like me tend to make things comfortable before serious conversations. I threw the window wide so the light would fall across the tablecloth and make the room feel less gloomy. Outside, traffic was picking up. I heard kids laughing on the street and an older lady greeting customers at the cafe across the way. Life went on as usual. While I was getting ready for the most important confrontation of my life, not in a courtroom, but with the son I brought into this world. I looked at the clock, 1:47. It wasn't time yet, but my heart was beating harder, not from fear but from keeping myself steady. I wanted Mason to see clearly. His mother is not the weak, confused woman Brielle painted me to be. I wanted every word I said to carry the weight of a truth they had tried to bury. A breeze moved through, carrying the scent of mint out to the porch. I sat down, placed my hand on my notebook, and told myself, if you choose conscience, I'll save you. If you choose silence, let the law do the rest. I turned the teacup slightly and watched the little circles ripple across the surface, each ring a symbol of 7 years of pressure, 7 years of endurance, 7 years of unconditional love. Now each ring was fading into the next, leaving the surface still like my heart before the storm. 1 more hour, and Mason would walk through that door. I told myself, this time, you won't only meet your mother, you'll meet the woman you and your wife woke up, the woman you should never have underestimated. I took the first sip of tea, the warmth sliding down my throat. Sunlight tilted across the old wall, leaving a soft band of light like a promise. Outside, a light breeze brushed the window frame, and the wind chime gave a gentle ring. I looked at the empty chair across from me and said out loud, "Son, I'm waiting." A knock sounded right at 2 p.m. Not early, not late. I stood, feeling not nervous but oddly as if I were about to preside over a hearing. The door opened. Mason stood there, pale, hair mussed, eyes sunken. He glanced around the shabby room, the stained ceiling, the lopsided single bed, the damp in the corner, then looked back at me, voice tight. "I'm sorry, Mom." Just 4 words. But I knew he'd crossed a long night to say them. I didn't answer, just motioned to the chair I'd wiped down that morning. "Sit, Mason. This room isn't pretty, but at least it's mine." He lowered his head, avoiding my eyes. The dim light through the window cast our silhouettes across the blotchy wall, 2 figures close, yet far. Not 5 minutes later, Brielle showed up. Her heels struck sharp on the concrete. A sweet, biting perfume swamped the lingering fryer smell from downstairs. She swept in, scanned the room, and smirked. "Cozy, isn't it?" I calmly set my cup down. "It's warm because there are no lies in here, Brielle." She shrugged, perched on the edge of the bed, and pulled out her phone like she was at some fancy meeting. Mason looked from her to me, awkward. I decided not to drag out the pretending. "I'll be brief," I said. "This morning, the lottery's attorney confirmed it. The name on the ticket is Lorraine Whitmore. The payout account is set. The money will hit within 24 hours. The room went still. Mason swallowed. After a few seconds, Brielle gave a thin laugh. "So you plan to keep it all?" I met her eyes. "I plan to keep what's mine." Mason lifted a hand. "Mom, I didn't come to fight. I just thought maybe we could make a deal. Like a family agreement so no one has to go to court." I smiled slightly, sorrow from 7 buried years behind it. "A deal? Mason, I've been making deals for 7 years. I dealt by staying silent when I was insulted. I dealt by paying the power bill when you were unemployed. I dealt by babysitting all day while your wife called me a freeloader. And the final deal, letting you throw my things out the window and saying nothing." Mason stared at his lap. Brielle sat straight, expression flat. She gave a light, scripted chuckle. "You misunderstand. I just think if we cooperate, everyone wins." We could buy a big house, you could live with us, have your own private suite, your own little kitchen, your own bath, every comfort. I lifted my head, voice cold as steel. A private suite? In your estate? That's right, Brielle said quickly, thinking I'd softened. Quiet, airy, private, just for you. I looked at her, letting my eyes settle on that fake smile. Sounds more like a dog kennel out back than a mother's room. She froze, color draining. Mason started to speak, but I raised a hand. Before we talk cooperation, I need answers, short ones. I opened a drawer and took out a folded paper, the expense log I'd kept for 7 years. I laid it on the table. First question, I said, eyes on Brielle. Who threw my things out the window that morning? She rolled her eyes. You know, I just lost my temper a little. So you admit it, I cut in. Second question, who called me a freeloader, a useless hanger-on? She gave a bitter smile. What do you want an apology? I want the truth, and if you need a refresher, Mason was standing right there. He can confirm. Mason drew a breath, voice shaking. Mom, yes, Brielle said it. I heard everything. Brielle snapped toward him, eyes blazing. What are you doing? I'm telling the truth, Mason said, and for the first time in years, there was a little courage in his tone. The tiny room felt tight as a wire. Brielle's hands were clenched white. I went on, quiet but clear. Thank you, Mason. You finally said what you should have said 7 years ago. I unfolded the paper and read, careful, line by line. Electric bill, $118 a month, 7 years. Water, about $42. Roof repair in 2018, $1,400. Ava and Micah's school costs, a total of $18,600. Groceries, medicine, household goods, can't even count. I folded the paper and set it down, all from my pension. I'm not saying this to collect, I'm reminding you these numbers are evidence of kindness, not obligation. With no way to dodge, Brielle started to fray. You think you're a saint? You give and now you're keeping score? If you don't sign a transfer, I'll sue you for asset fraud. Mason flinched. Brielle, stop. But I was already on my feet, calmer than even I expected. I pointed to the door, still slightly open. You're free to leave, Brielle. No threats, no theater. The court isn't far, life will teach you for me. She shot up, eyes burning. You'll regret this. I cut in. No, you will. When you learn money can't buy 1 second of peace, when the kids start asking why grandma isn't home anymore, when your husband stops bowing his head, then you'll know who's truly pitiable. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her face went from red to white. Then, without a word, she turned, heels hammering the floor, and the door slammed like a gavel. Silence again, just me and Mason. He bowed his head low. Mom, I don't know what to say. I let it go too far. I looked at my son, his face gaunt, but for the first time in years, his eyes held a little honesty. Just remember, I said, low but gentle, every mistake has a price. The only price I want from you is the truth. He nodded, eyes wet. Can you forgive me? I sighed softly. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, Mason. It's remembering and choosing not to take revenge. I stood and set a hand on his shoulder. Now go, take care of the kids. Tomorrow I'll claim the money. After that, we'll talk again. If you still want a mother. Mason squeezed my hand, then left. When the door clicked shut, the room fell, quiet. I sat and looked at the 2 teacups, one still warm, one gone cold. I knew the line between us was like those 2 cups. Once the same fragrance, no longer the same moment. I lit another candle and wrote in my notebook, this afternoon the rented room became a courtroom. No judge, no jury, just conscience. That evening, Mason came back. Brielle wasn't with him. It was just him, wrinkled shirt, eyes red from no sleep. I was in the same spot, the little wooden table with 2 cups of tea, as if time hadn't moved since the stormy afternoon. He stood at the door, unsure where to begin. I motioned for him to sit and said softly, "You don't need to explain anymore, Mason. I understand. Now I want to talk about the future and the conditions for it to exist." He nodded, hands clenched until the knuckles went white. I poured tea and slid the cup toward him. "I will help you," I began, "but not for you, for Ava and Micah." He looked up, hope and shame mixed in his eyes. I spoke slowly, each word clear. "You put deposits on cars, a house, and silly luxuries I never needed. I can cover those, consider it protecting the kids from the financial chaos their parents created." Mason started to thank me, but I held up a hand. "Don't thank me yet. I said I'd help, not forgive. Every bit of help comes with conditions, and you need to understand forgiveness is not a get-out-of-jail-free card." I met his eyes, my voice dropping. "First condition. You end this toxic marriage. No half measures, no stalling. If you let Brielle drag you down, I'll pull all support. I won't bankroll anyone who chooses to live in the mud." Mason went still. I saw his shoulders tremble, but he didn't object. "Second condition," I continued, "you apologize publicly right on the front steps, in front of the neighbors who watched you let your wife humiliate me. Not to make me feel good, but to make you learn responsibility through action, not tears." I paused, took a sip, then said the last part, the hardest for him. "Third condition, you go to counseling for single fathers. Not because I think you're weak, but because you need to relearn how to be a dad. Ava and Micah deserve a decent example, not a husband who stays silent when their mother is insulted." The air felt thick. Mason didn't speak for a full minute. Then he exhaled, voice small, as if afraid to wake someone. "What about Brielle?" I looked toward the window, the streetlights reflected on the glass, throwing a cold gold into the room. "She'll do what people like her always do, scream, blame, threaten, and I'll let her. But if she wants a fight, I'm ready." As if on cue, a hard, rapid knock hit the door. I didn't need to guess who it was. The door swung open and Brielle walked in, still beautiful but with clouded eyes. Arms folded, she let out a razor-edged laugh. "Perfect. Mommy and son plotting again?" Mason stood. "Brielle, I told you to stay home. At home so you can let her brainwash you?" She turned to me, a curled, contemptuous smile. "What are you doing teaching him conscience? Or is this emotional blackmail?" I stayed calm, letting none of her noise stir me. "I'm setting the terms for forgiveness, Brielle. And you, sadly, aren't on the list." "Oh, really?" She arched a brow, voice sharper. "You think you can control my husband forever? I'll take full custody and half the assets. I have legal rights and I know the law." I gave a small smile and answered evenly, no louder than conversation. "Then sue, Brielle. But remember, don't use my money to hire your lawyer." Silence stretched. In her eyes, I caught a flicker of confusion, maybe the first time she'd met someone who wasn't afraid. Mason turned, put a hand on my shoulder, and said, voice rough, "Mom, I choose you, and the kids." I didn't hug him or say more. I just nodded. Arthur's old words rang in my head. A man grows up when he faces consequences. Mason had stepped over that line, and I would let him walk it himself. Brielle looked at her husband, eyes rimmed red. "You'll regret this." Mason didn't answer. His silence was the reply she refused to accept. She yanked the door, the metal clanging against the wall. "I won't let this go! You'll lose everything!" Her voice cracked, split between hate and fear. I just watched her go and said, my voice low, "No, Brielle. You're the one who's losing because you've thrown away the one thing money can't buy. Respect." She snapped. "We'll see you in court. I'm not afraid." I smiled, light as a breeze. Good, because this time, the court won't just ask who's right, it'll ask who forgot how to be human. Brielle spun on her heel. Her high heels hammered the metal stairs, echoing beat by beat like a countdown to an oncoming legal storm. I sat still and listened until the sound faded, leaving only silence. Mason collapsed into the chair, head in his hands. I don't even know where to start. Start by keeping your word, I said. Tomorrow, go apologize to Penelope and the neighbors who saw everything. Tell it all. No excuses. And from now on, you'll pay your own rent, your own tuition, every last bill. I can help, but I won't bankroll you anymore. He nodded. In those red-rimmed eyes, I saw a faint light, not the glow of someone forgiven, but of someone beginning to understand what starting over means. I stood and refilled his tea. Drink it, so you remember the taste of truth. Bitter at first, clean after. Mason took a small sip and gave a tiny nod. I understand, Mom. Softly I answered, No, Mason, you're learning to understand. When he left, Savannah's night sank into a heavy mist. I stood at the window and watched his headlights disappear around the corner. On the table, my notebook lay open to a page half written. I picked up my pen and added, Tonight, my son chose what's right over what's easy. Forgiveness comes with terms because love isn't a servant. The clack of a liar's heels travels far, but in the end, silence wins. I set the pen down and blew out the candle. In the dark, only the streetlight framed the window and threw back my face tired, but at peace. Tomorrow, the legal fight would begin. But this time, I wouldn't be alone. The next afternoon, the sun finally broke through Savannah after days of gloom. Light glittered off rain-wet leaves like tinsel. I put on a beige cardigan and picked up my small bag. Inside were the folded lottery ticket, the receipt copy, and my ID, everything I'd prepared the night before. Attorney Grant Holloway arrived right on time. He opened the car door, as courteous as ever. Ready, Lorraine? I smiled. I've been ready for 7 years, Grant. Today I'm just reclaiming what's fair. We reached the Georgia Lottery office at 3:15 p.m. The headquarters stood in a sleek glass building, sky blue reflections running across it. As we walked through the entrance, the soft click of the automatic door sounded ordinary, but to me, it was a lock opening on a brand new chapter. Inside, a staffer led us to a verification room. A middle-aged woman in a gray suit came out to greet us, introducing herself as the Special Prize Records Manager. Are you the owner of the winning ticket number 78 amperes 4539? Yes, I said, taking the ticket from its plastic sleeve and laying it gently on the table. Gloved, she inspected it under a special light, matched the signature and serial number, then pulled up security footage from Benny's Corner Mart, the store where I'd bought the ticket on Ava's birthday. The screen showed a silver-haired woman in a brown coat signing the back of the ticket. No zoom needed, I knew it was me. Holloway nodded at me. The staffer said, The signature is a complete match. The ticket is valid. We'll seal and process the payout today. I exhaled, not in relief, but release. After verification, they presented payout options. I studied the list and said clearly, I'd like an initial portion now, enough to cover immediate needs. The remainder goes into a trust named the Arthur and Lorraine Whitmore Trust. The staffer looked a bit surprised. You want to set up a trust right now? Yes. I lost an honest husband and gave my life to our family. This trust is how I keep the cleanest part of that life intact. Holloway smiled. I'll finalize the trust paperwork today. It'll be a private trust, no public names, no media access. I nodded. Exactly. I've had enough noise. I want quiet, not spotlights. When everything was done, Holloway set the packet on the table. Do you want me to submit Miss Penelope Banks's statement as well? I've got her handwritten account detailing how Brielle and Mason started spending before any funds actually arrived. I gave a small smile. Yes, not just for me, but for the truth. I want the record to show that kindness isn't stupidity. Holloway filed the full-set statement, receipts, video proof, and bank confirmations. The manager reviewed, signed, and sealed. "Congratulations, Miss Whitmore," she said warmly. "One last step. The first transfer will be made within 48 hours. The trust will go active upon approval." I held the receipt and read the printed line, "Recipient, Lorraine Whitmore." One sheet, 12 letters, but proof of honor for a woman once called a freeloader. On the drive back, Holloway asked, "Any plans for the first disbursement?" "I want to open a separate education trust for the kids Ava and Micah." "Good," he said. "I can help you set binding terms." "I only have one requirement," I said. "They can access it at 18 with proof of schooling. No one Mason included withdraws early. No adult touches. That money, not even me." Holloway studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You know, Lorraine, very few big winners think that far ahead. Most only think about spending." I smiled. "I've lived long enough to know money only matters when it stays where it should." That evening, I signed a lease for a small house near Seabrook Bay. It was quiet, with a front porch facing the water and a little garden. I put down a deposit to redo the kitchen and asked for a trellis of climbing roses, the kind Arthur once tended at the old place. The contractor asked, "What color?" "Velvety red, summer bloomers with a strong scent," I said. "I want to open the door each morning and remember him not with tears, but with fragrance." I paid, then left the rental office. Driving past the bay, the water caught the orange of the setting Sunday. For a moment I saw myself a woman once thrown out of her home walking down the road of her own freedom. Night fell. I went back to the old room to finish packing. My phone pinged an email from Brielle. Subject: Legal notice and health warning. I opened it. A long paragraph and an attachment, a medical report forged in my name, claiming I had significant memory impairment and lacked the capacity to manage finances. She still didn't understand the game was over. I forwarded it to Holloway. In under 5 minutes he called. "Lorraine, she's just made a serious mistake. That's defamation with fabricated documents. I'll send a formal cease and desist and put her on notice if she continues. We'll sue under Section 16 of the Freedom of Information and Reputation Protection Act." Quietly I said, "Grant, see? People only lie when they're afraid of the truth." He chuckled. "You're right. But now the law's on your side. Let me handle the rest." I nodded and closed my phone. A sea breeze slipped through the cracked window, salt soft. I sat on the bed, shoulders, finally, loosening after months clenched tight. I thought about tomorrow, the day I'd officially be the winner of $85 million, but that no longer moved me. What soothed me most was proving I'm not crazy, not weak, and don't need anyone to define my worth. I looked at Arthur's photo on the table, his eyes as kind and deep as ever. "See, love," I whispered. "I did it. I kept signing my own name just like you told me." I lay down and let the night wind play with the curtain. For the first time in years I slept deep, no screaming, no slamming doors, no shattering things, only the far-off sound of waves and a peace like old arms around me. Tonight, I stopped running from fear because it turned into evidence of resolve. May brought Savannah's damp winds. Mornings draped the city in a thin, cold veil. On one such morning, I got the court notice. Brielle Carter Whitmore had officially filed suit. The cause, as stated, was seeking custody and determination of the legal guardian for minors Ava and Micah. The complaint was nearly 100 pages. She accused me of manipulating Mason with lottery winnings, psychologically influencing him to break up the family, and lacking the capacity to control a large asset, creating a risk of financial abuse. I read every line, half laughing, half sighing. She still wouldn't stop. Instead of bowing her head and making amends, Brielle chose a loser's favorite lane-swapping victim and culprit. Holloway lifted the file and raised an eyebrow. She's forgotten she's leaving a trail. This suit won't just fail, it'll expose her completely. I nodded. I don't need a flashy win, Grant. I just want everything seen in the light. 2 weeks later, the first hearing opened. The judge was Meredith Shaw, a woman in her 50s with a sharp eye and an even voice. When I entered, she looked at me not with pity, but with the quiet respect reserved for someone who has endured too much. Brielle sat across the aisle in a pristine white dress, perfect hair, carefully done makeup. She held Mason's hand, but his eyes were cast down. I knew that grip wasn't love anymore, it was a shackle. Judge Shaw started with assessments of living conditions. The social worker reported, Miss Whitmore's former rented room is recorded as neat and safe, though modest. The new Seabrook house has been inspected clean, comfortable, suitable for an older adult with space for children. Mr. Mason Whitmore's home is currently well maintained, with a stable plan for both children. By contrast, Miss Brielle Carter Whitmore's residence is under an unpaid mortgage and has a history of noise and disturbance complaints. Brielle tried to cut in, voice shooting high. I only work from home. And he can't raise the kids alone. Judge Shaw raised a hand. You'll have your turn. Next came the witnesses. Penelope Banks took the stand with a frayed little notebook. She recounted hearing Brielle insult me, the nights I quietly hauled trash, the bills I paid. When the judge asked why she remembered so clearly, Penelope said, because I watched a woman hold a family together with kindness and get pushed out the door by the same people. Then, 2 other neighbors spoke, followed by the corner store manager who confirmed I bought the ticket, signed it, and kept the receipt. Finally, Holloway played video from Penelope's porch camera, Brielle, throwing my things out the window to the shout of, "Go die in a nursing home." The courtroom went silent. Brielle bowed her head. Mason trembled, tears streaming. Judge Shaw tapped the gavel softly, voice steady. Miss Carter Whitmore, the court has reviewed this. Verbal abuse, control, and defamation of an elder without physical violence still constitutes serious psychological abuse. Brielle burst into tears. I was just stressed. Stress does not excuse humiliation, the judge said, firm. When it was Mason's turn, I didn't look at my son. I just listened. He laid out a plan for single fatherhood, Ava and Micah's school schedules, a detailed budget, proof he'd enrolled in parenting counseling. The judge asked, "Do you have the financial ability to care for both children?" Mason answered, "Yes, Your Honor, I'm back to full-time work. My mother set up an education trust for the kids, but she doesn't interfere in my personal life." That sentence made me relax my shoulders a little. After all these years, he finally knew how to say something honest without dodging it. When it was my turn, the judge asked, "Miss Lorraine, do you have anything to say about custody?" I stood, looked around the room, and said slowly, "I'm not here to win or lose. I just want my 2 grandkids to be safe and grow up in a home without fear. Whichever side can give them that, that's the side I'll support." The courtroom went silent. The judge nodded, her eyes softening. After 2 days of hearings, the ruling was announced. The court granted primary custody to Mason and gave Brielle supervised visitation. She was required to attend a 6-month counseling program on behavioral control and family communication. As for the suit over claiming the lottery prize, the judge dismissed it entirely and formally reprimanded Brielle for deliberate defamation and manipulation of medical information. Judge Shaw read the final lines of the decision, firm and clear. The court recognizes Miss Lorraine Whitmore as the legal owner of the winning ticket and as a victim of defamation. Truth does not need a defender, it only needs time. And time has done its work. Brielle bowed her head, gripping the chair, face white as paper. Mason said nothing. He just held my hand tight, the grip I'd waited 7 years to feel. When we stepped out of the courthouse, wind from Seabrook Bay blew hard, bringing the ocean's salt and a cool mist. My silver hair flew wild, but I didn't smooth it down. For the first time in my life, I let the wind do what it wanted as a sign of freedom. Holloway walked beside me, smiling. "You just won 2 cases at once, Lorraine. People are going to write about this." I smiled. "That's all right." I asked for anonymity. "I don't need anyone to know I won, I just need the kids to know truth won." Penelope came running from a distance and hugged me tight. "Told you, justice may arrive late, but it never loses its way." I laughed and looked out at the bay. "Thanks, Pen. I just want to go home and plant roses." "The trellis is waiting." Mason stood next to me and said softly, "Mom, I want to move to Seabrook, not into your house, but nearby. So Ava and Micah can run over to see you anytime." I nodded without saying more. A tear slipped from the corner of my eye, not from sadness but from release. That night, I sat on the porch of my new home, looking out at water gleaming in the moonlight. Waves tapped the shore in steady beats like my own heartbeat. No more anger, no more resentment. I opened my notebook and wrote the final lines for the longest day of my life. Today, the court didn't just rule on Brielle, it ruled on my 7 years of silence. The price of deceit is losing trust. The reward for resolve is peace. The bay wind ran through my hair, salty and light. I looked up and saw a single star break through the gray. Softly, as if to Arthur, I said, "See? In the end, justice found its way home." I moved into the little house in Seabrook on a gentle morning in early June. The sea was pale blue, the waves calm, and the kitchen smelled faintly of cinnamon under fresh paint. I chose cream walls and set lavender pots by the window so every morning I could sip tea and watch silver waves hit the rocks. The house was small but enough for one person. A bright living room, a warm kitchen, a bedroom facing the bay. I rehung the old photos, Arthur's kind smile, little Mason with a kite, Ava and Micah in my lap when they were tiny. Each picture felt like a stitch pulling the torn pieces of memory back together. On the first day, Mason called. "Mom, can I bring the kids over this weekend?" I smiled. "The door's always open, but bring your dad's chowder recipe." Saturday afternoon, with gold light pouring over the bay, Mason drove up. Ava and Micah leapt from the car, their laughter ringing across the yard. I don't know how long I'd been smiling, only that a simple, complete feeling filled me. Family, without the heaviness. Mason rolled up his sleeves in the kitchen. I watched him clumsily chop onions and taste the soup, and I thought of Arthur, so patient, teaching his son every step. "Mom, I don't remember the exact amounts of milk and cream," Mason said, sweat beading on his forehead. I answered, "Arthur never measured. He cooked by feel and by love." We made the first chowder in the new kitchen. As the smell of corn, cream, and pepper drifted through the house, I realized some scents never die, they just sleep until your heart is ready to wake them. After dinner, I took Ava outside. She wore a pale blue dress, cheeks pink from the Sunday. I opened a small box and brought out the turquoise bicycle, the dream left unfinished years ago. Ava squealed, "Grandma, really? This is for me?" I nodded, eyes stinging. "Yes, for you, but there's a condition: you have to keep a promise." "What promise?" "Never let anyone make you believe you don't deserve good things." She hugged me, then hopped on and pedaled around the yard. Her laughter rang all afternoon like a bell washing the old bitterness clean. Meanwhile, Micah sat in the living room, carefully building with Legos on the wooden table Arthur once sanded by hand. Each time he finished a model, he ran to show me. "Look, Grandma, I matched the picture." I patted his head and thought, "Arthur, do you see? The kids still have your skillful hands." A few weeks later, Mason started a support group for single dads. I didn't push, just encouraged. Most evenings after, he'd share, "They're teaching me how to set boundaries, how to say no without guilt, and how to say yes when it's about responsibility. I smiled. You're learning what your father taught his whole life. Being a good man doesn't require shouting, just knowing right from wrong. Mason changed slowly. The tightness left his face. When he came to pick up the kids, he'd say, "Don't let Grandma lift heavy things. Clean up after dinner." I didn't step into his personal life anymore. I loved my son, but I'd learned to love with limits. I also set clear financial boundaries. I said plainly, any help from me, tuition, counseling, childcare needs receipts, a purpose, and a clear commitment. I won't use money to patch over mistakes anymore. Mason understood. He nodded without pride. At last he'd grown up. In the fall, I started a small project, Hands for Home, a program helping older adults who are exploited or abandoned by family find temporary housing. The idea came one night after reading a letter from a woman in another state whose son had taken her pension. I invited Penelope to join. She was so excited she showed up the next morning with a box of paint and brushes. Where do we begin, Lorraine? We repainted an old dining table she donated. The new coat covered the scratches, looking worn yet warm. I said, "This table will be the first place where anyone can sit and eat without being insulted." She laughed. "Sounds like our table, just a little bigger." When the paint dried, we centered it in the living room and set a velvet red rose arrangement, Arthur's favorite. That table later became our weekend gathering spot, where I heard my grandkids laugh, Mason talk, kitchen tricks, and Penelope chat about the neighbors. One evening, when the house was quiet, I sat to write. In front of me, a blank page. Beside me, the old fountain pen Arthur used for his first contract. I wrote a letter to myself. Lorraine, forgiveness doesn't mean erasing. It means moving on without letting the past trip you. People can change, but not everyone deserves to come close again. Your son is learning to be a father. You are learning to be yourself again. I folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer addressed to the woman in the mirror who made it through the storm without breaking. Night fell, and sea air swept across the porch, carrying salt and roses. I went to the garden, cut a red bloom, and brought it inside. On the shelf, Arthur's photo still smiled the same. I set the rose before the frame and whispered, "I put myself first, Arthur, just like you told me, and I kept my word." I sat quietly, listening to the waves. Each one said what I needed to hear. Sometimes healing isn't going back. It's standing together with clear boundaries. I smiled and blew out the candle. The light faded, leaving only cinnamon in the air and the steady hush of the sea, the final lullaby for a woman who found peace, not in others, but in herself. That afternoon, a sudden downpour hammered the porch roof, knocking at memory like a steady drum. I was brewing mint tea when I heard a sound at the gate. Opening the door, I saw Brielle holding a frayed umbrella, eyes bruised with exhaustion, the confidence gone from her hollow face. "What do you need, Brielle?" I asked, calm. She hesitated, then said quietly, almost a whisper, "I need help." I invited her onto the porch but kept the door pulled to. Boundaries aren't just a latch, they're a choice. Rain ran off the roof and streaked the concrete. She sat on the wooden chair Penelope had painted, hands trembling in her lap. "Creditors are after me," she said finally. "I lost my job at the firm. I don't know where to start." I looked at her. The arrogance was gone. Just a woman depleted by her own choices. "You want a quick fix, don't you?" I asked. Brielle nodded, lips quivering. I answered slowly, "There are no shortcuts, Brielle, only responsibility and repair." She lowered her head, tears mixing with rain. "I was wrong. I lost everything. Mason, the kids, even myself." I said nothing, just poured her a hot cup of tea. Mint filled the porch, masking the damp. From a drawer, I took a small envelope. Inside were no bills, only a list of job centers and counseling groups for people with controlling behaviors. I slid it toward her. These are contacts and addresses. They'll help if you truly want to start over. She held it and looked up. Can I see the kids? The court was clear, I said. If you complete the counseling sessions, you can have supervised visits. Mason won't block it, and neither will I. She nodded, eyes wet. And one more thing, I added, gentle but firm. I won't hand you cash, not $1. But if you need a hot meal or honest advice, this porch stays open as long as you walk in with honesty. Silence stretched, then Brielle choked out, I'm sorry, Lorraine. I looked at her a long time. I hear you, and I accept it in my own way. She left when the rain eased. Her small figure faded down the speckled road. I knew the loop of resentment had snapped, at least on my end. That night we ate clam chowder together. Mason shared about his support group and said he was helping another single dad find work. I smiled. You're learning to give without losing yourself. Ava ate while telling us how she fell off her bike, scraped her knee, but got up on her own. Grandma, I didn't cry. I remembered what you said. No one stays down if they know how to stand up. I ruffled her hair. Good job, Ava. Micah sat with hands folded, eyes closed. I pray my mom gets better soon. The room fell quiet. I heard wind slip through the window and smelled cinnamon steaming from the pot. After dinner, I stood on the porch, watching Seabrook Bay sink into dark red sunset. Ripples glinted like shards of glass, beautiful, and a reminder that anything once broken can shine again if the light comes from within. I thought of Arthur. If he were here, he'd probably smile and say, See, Lorraine? In the end, we are our choices. And I had chosen self-respect, clarity, and love with boundaries. That night I wrote the last lines in my notebook. No one can start a new chapter by rereading the old one forever. Today, I close the book not to end it, but to begin again. I set down my pen and looked up at the ceiling. The rain had stopped. Far off, Mason's porch light still glowed warm, not bright, but steady. Ava and Micah were surely asleep, and Brielle somewhere might be learning how to be a decent mother again. I smiled and lit a small candle before Arthur's photo. Love, I whispered. I've gone farther than the pain, and I've come back to myself. Thank you for sitting beside me all the way to this moment. If you're still here, you've traveled with me through storms and the quiet places only the heart can hear. What city are you watching from? I'd love to know where this story has reached, and who's listening with me. If anything in this story touched you, self-respect, resilience, or simply love with limits, leave a comment and share your thoughts. And if you'd like to keep sitting with me in this kitchen where there's hot tea, clam chowder, and stories of healing, please subscribe and tap the little bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Your presence wherever you are warms this kitchen more than any flame ever could.